there's the the office people and the floor people. And that is one of the worst barriers, whether virtual or physical, to have in an organization is, oh, you guys are just on the floor. And so there's a lot of information that's happening in the office that never makes it to the floor. And sometimes it's like, man, those floor guys, they just don't get it. And it's like, well, we didn't get it because you never sent it. So had you told us, we could have made the adjustments for this.
Welcome to the Better Batch podcast, where batch process manufacturers learn from industry experts. I'm Alex Kovas.
And I'm Peter Sutter. Joining us today is Adrian Betts, who brings a ton of expertise on warehousing. Adrian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you guys for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about when companies bring you in, what kind of challenges are they facing in the warehouse? What kind of stuff are you tackling?
So it's a variety of when you can bring me in the warehouse. There's really no bad time. Typically, I'm brought in when it's a dumpster fire. So one of the things I like to do when I'm not fixing warehouses is I enjoy dumpster fires. So if things are running bad, definitely call me. If you feel things need to be turned around, that's good. Also, if you can learn from the mistakes of others, a startup. So if you're greenfield or you're going into some existing building, somewhat brownfield, and from the moment the first employee gets into the door all the way up to full maturity, we can help you out there as well. So,
do you feel like there's good ways for companies to get started without a big budget for improving operations in the warehouse?
Yeah, there's building blocks, there's atoms. So whatever your lofty goals are, let's say I want to do 100,000 orders a day, figure out what a block of 10,000 orders looks like, right? And if 10,000 orders is the pie in the sky number, figure out what 1,000 looks like. And so once you figure out to dial in the minimum viable head count and they can do X per day, then you use that and you multiply that to figure out how you're going to break through the milestones all the way up to max capacity.
You've talked a lot about don't have to spend a lot of money to improve warehouse operations. There's some inexpensive things you can do to turn that around. A lot of people, I'm sure, are really interested to learn about that. Tell us more about some of these things people could be doing right now to, improve warehouse operations without spending a ton of cash.
Well, the number one thing you could do is all of the work instructions, you document them in electronic format. That's first and foremost, right? So, and this should not be taken lightly. So this is grandma's recipes, right? I ask people, I said, raise your hand if you had a grandmother. Almost everybody's hand goes up because no immaculate conception. And I say, keep your hand up if she's still with you, and hands start to go down. And I say, think about the one item or food dish that you wish grandma were still around to make. And everybody knows what that dish is just off the top of their head. And I say that the real reason you're unable to, enjoy that dish anymore is not so much because grandma's no longer here, but because you never spent the time with her when she was here to document her recipe on how to do it. So if you want to enjoy the taste of that success or whatever it is and have some longevity to it, you have to have a documented process that at any point in time, anybody can follow.
Makes a lot of sense. So one of the things we love to talk about a lot are the connections between departments. And I know, obviously coming from warehouse, I'm curious where you see, I guess there's two parts to the question. The first is, where do you see the most communication breakdowns, right? What other departments, or where are the handoffs where the ball gets dropped?
There's a lot of bad handoffs or operations to almost anywhere else. And it really boils down to this, and I'm going to look right into the heart of the camera on this one. There's the office people and the floor people. And that is one of the worst barriers, whether virtual or physical, to have in an organization is, oh, you guys are just on the floor. And so there's a lot of information that's happening in the office that never makes it to the floor. And sometimes it's like, man, those floor guys, they just don't get it. And it's like, well, we didn't get it because you never sent it. So had you told us, we could have made the adjustments for this. We could have made the adjustments for that. I'm entering into my 5th year of doing this, and I'm very good at warehousing. But one thing that I've never been good at, and that's reading minds. So the communication has to happen. Otherwise, it's just a guessing game.
Amazing.
How do you improve that communication then between makes a ton of sense. Obviously, getting better communication between the office and the floor. How do you foster better communication between those two groups?
Um, Away games. And when I say away games, anybody who likes sports knows that their team plays games at home. And then you have to play in your opponent's stadium. And so when I say that, I don't look at my other counterparts as my opponents, but I meet them where they are.
Sure.
Hey, Sales, how you doing today? Hey, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for asking. I just wanted to, if there's 1, 2, 3 things that you really would like operations to start doing to make your day easier, what would those things be? Oh yeah, this, that, the other, the third, the fourth, the fifth. Okay, cool. And so if I were to communicate this and share this in this format, would that help? Yep. And this whole time I'm scanning their area, find out something personal about them. And then I say, oh, so you're a Yankees fan, huh? There's something about the Yankees. I'm either going to talk smack and rib them, get them going, because either you love to love the Yankees or you love to be hated as a Yankee. And your personal connection you can make with that person after you've asked them what you can do better to serve them, that's like the icing on the cake.
Yeah. And, something that we see as well, and it's like you sometimes think you can solve communication through technology, and that's a big part of, how I see technology, but, you can put the tools in people's hands, but even if on the warehouse floor, they've got barcode scanning, they've got all of that good stuff to document information and get it in the system and get it to the office. If you don't have that conversation between the office and the floor where we're saying like, oh, here's why it matters. Here's why we need you to like actually scan the pallet into its location every time reliably, because later on when we do X, Y, Z, we're going to look for the information. It's, this is what matters. And then also do them the favor, like, oh, that step, you can cut that out. You don't need that. Those conversations get skipped. And, that's when things start to devolve. My other favorite one, sometimes walking into a facility, is why don't you guys have walkie-talkies? But that's a low-tech solution, but right. You often see that too. So it's kind of surprising.
But it works. It works. Low tech, no tech. And tech is great, right? So I love AI, love Google. And I think AI is to Google what Google is to the Dewey Decimal System, right? Mm-hmm. So my search engine was the Dewey Decimal System. And for those who don't know, that's how we would go into the library, which was the analog internet. And that's how we would know where everything was in the library without having to go and touch every single book.
Back in the warehouse part, you've had a bunch of experience as a loader, obviously, starting out there and then growing out. What kind of hands-on experiences have you had where you saw a disconnect between what's going on the floor and what's going on in the office or with management?
Usually one of the biggest ones is just communicating, understanding our capacity, right? So let's say that everybody shows up, then we can do 5,000 orders. The workload today is 3,500. So I have 1,500 of additional capacity, right? And again, part of this is on me if I don't tell sales, hey, I have 1,500 of ad hoc capacity today. They go out there and say, yeah, we can do another 4,000 orders. No, we can't. Oh, we can only do about 1,500. And now the other 2,500 are going to be at risk. And so that's why for me, it's just as much on me to say, here's what my max is for the day. Here's what I have to do today. Here's what you can add on. And then crystal clear, we say, hey, customer, there's 2,500 that, are you okay getting it later? And if you do want it all at once, it won't be today. How do you want us to proceed? So that's one of the things that's probably one of the biggest disconnects between, the front office and floor.
You've talked about, I've asked you this before earlier in the podcast, and I'll ask you some more. You talked about using SOPs to help. There's a really inexpensive way from a money point of view to make things run smoother in the warehouse. What other stuff have you done to get more throughput out of a warehouse with not necessarily investing in a whole system or kind of the expensive things? How do we get stuff out of existing resources?
You got to go slower to go faster. And a lot of companies, like one thing I say you should not do, nobody should start their job function on the day they start with the company. They're like, we're wasting money. We're paying them and they're not doing anything.
Sure.
Yeah, but I mean, when I had kids, they weren't getting themselves dressed in the first week, right? So we got to have realistic expectations. And so when you take 2 to 4 days to say, hey, here's your system access, here's your direct deposit, health and benefits, here's the bathroom, the break room, the conference room, so you don't get lost and waste a lot of time walking around. Not only are these the policies, but here's what these policies mean. Let's walk through scenarios. Let's understand them so you guys don't end up getting terminated because I made you sign a piece of paper, but you didn't really understand what that meant as far as how to act in the environment. That's one thing. And then once you get them familiar with the lay of the land and the law of the land, then you give them to the supervisor. They know their department, they know their area, and you take 30 days and you say, look, here's what we're going to do. And it's kind of like a cooking show. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to make a cake. I'm going to mix the ingredients. Watch me. Now you do it. And they do the same thing. And I said, does yours look like mine? It either does or it doesn't. And we're going to assess 2 things: what you do well and what you can do better. And then we're going to go again, and we're going to do that every day for 30 days. And the ramp up is 25% the first week, 50% of expectation the second week, 75% of expectation the third, and 100% fully ramped up at the end of 30 days.
That's a great onboarding, strategy anywhere. It was fantastic.
Yeah, for any kind of teaching there. And actually, it causes me to circle back on what you said about the grandmother analogy and, visualizing that. And certainly I learned to cook from my grandfather and I have a great memory of that, but I learned it all through watching and doing. At a certain stage and scalability, it all has to be written down, of course. And like you said, documented electronically. What are some of the, what frame would you use to take one of those touchy-feely, oral traditions and turn it into a written process that can then be trained out to, dozens and hundreds of people?
So there are pictures worth 1,000 words. Video is worth 1,000 pictures. And then an analogy is worth 1,000 videos. So use all of these to your advantage, right? So YouTube is massively advantageous for one simple thing. Not only can I tell you what I'm doing, I can show you each step of what I'm doing, but I can also show you the continuous movement from start to finish, right? So I can say, hey, start a fire, get wood, light a match. Okay, first, let's get the very small stuff that burns very easily. Let's put that at the bottom, make sure it kind of frays out. Then you get slightly larger pieces of wood until you kind of build a teepee. You want to put an accelerant on it. Here's where you get the accelerant on it. Here's how you handle it. Here's how much you put on it so you don't end up being, going viral for injuring yourself. And then here's how you light a match. Here's where you place it so that it catches. Here's how you maintain it so that it becomes self-sustainable. Here's how you spread it out. And now you put the meat on the grill, and here's how you make sure you don't burn it, so on and so forth, forever and ever. Amen.
Do you find a lot of your work when you come into the warehouse, a lot of our listeners run a full production factory and warehouses and is a facet of it. So your warehouse specific experience is excellent. Do you find when you go into a warehouse, most of it is around training? It's like your SOPs were fine. You guys have a good plan on how to do it. Just you had Peter who doesn't know what he's doing. Is that a big push for you in the facilities once you get there?
Yeah, it's those 3 things, or at least at this point 4. So number 1, did we have it written down? But if we do, that's great.
Right. Number
2, did we ever take the time to walk them through and have them understand it? It would just give them a piece of paper and say, hey, do your job. The third thing is the communication. And this isn't just from the floor to the front office. This is floor to floor. Right. So that's why I take the 30 days, is because I want you to be comfortable saying, Adrian, I know you told me how to do this. You just told me, but I'm not understanding it. I'm like, well, what part aren't you understanding? Walk me through. And we say, okay, out of step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you're struggling with 3, and not just 3A, B, but you're specifically struggling with 3C. Right. So that's why we do this, because it could be any one of those. And I try to make my net with holes small enough that I catch all of that.
And then what's those 4, right? So 1, write it down. 2, make sure everybody's trained up. 3, open lines of communication between Adrian. Am I doing this correctly? I don't think I quite. Can you double check what I'm doing? So that's 3. What's 4?
The cadence, right? You can't do anything once, right? So if I go to the gym one day for the year, I'm not going to have abs, right? So I can't expect my team to develop or get stronger or improve in its output if I only interact with them once or only when things are bad. So I have to interact with them, period.
How do you go ahead?
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah. So when you encounter somebody who maybe they're struggling, what we sometimes hear from management when we're rolling out systems, before we even try, you hear a hesitation of like, I'm not so sure whether the people have the right capabilities around technology, around the tools. I'm not comfortable trying to do that. And, I often think, well, you're giving up before you've even made the effort. I'm curious your thoughts on that. And then also, does there ever come a time when you say, we need to examine our hiring process and get the right people in the door as well as having these good training processes?
Yeah. Getting the right people in is fundamental. And so I'll say, here's how I go about doing it, right? Because I have a process where I can teach one person to hire 640 people in a 9-month time frame by themselves while still running the operation, right? So I didn't always grow up with on-site HR, so I had to do my own recruiting. And so if we open up Google right now and we don't type any words in the search bar and hit enter, Google's going to sit there and be like, okay, right? You're not going to find anything because you're not looking for anything, right? So when we go into the applicant pool and we had 2,000 applicants, for example, and we typed in the top 3 keywords that I was looking for out of a new hire, what I needed the most. I needed somebody who knew Word to help document SOPs, Excel, because we were horrible at inventory. And 3, I needed reach truck drivers because we did not have enough people to bring the replens down. And just because somebody can drive an electric pallet jack doesn't mean they can drive a reach truck.
Right.
And if you don't have enough reach truck drivers and you got replens to bring down, you're toast.
Mm-hmm.
So we put these 3 keywords into the search bar of the applicant tracking software at ATS. And out of 2,212 applicants, 125 of them pulled up. That had all 3 skill sets. I said, must have all 3. I called up the first 16 people. I said, hey, I'm having interviews on this day, 16 30-minute interviews in that day. And I pretty much know I'm going to hire Peter and Alex, unless they say something goofy like, what's a forklift? Then you probably don't match what's on your resume, right? So when I bring these people in, and at this point, you can see how I interact, right? So they understand exactly what to expect if they're going to be a part of my team. So hire those 16 people in one day. I do that same thing every week. And then I have my orientations, which we talked about, every 2 weeks. They got to have at least 2 weeks apart. And I try, once I get to 2 weeks apart, I'm not going to do 3 weeks apart. I'm never going to go to 1 week apart. It's going to be the same 2-week cadence the remainder of the year. Mm-hmm. And what that does, it allows my HR, my orientation people, my onboarders, my trainers, it allows them a cadence that they can get one class on their feet and able to move on their own before the next class comes in.
You're saying if it's any faster than that, just the system, it's too fast, right? The system starts to break down then for training and everything else.
You start having week 3. What ends up happening is you increase your turnover with stuff like that, right? So even if you're short like 100 people, don't try to catch that up in 1 week, right? Figure out how to get to, 80 people short, then 60 people short, then 40, and you cadence it and you just say, hey, look, man, here's how deep my backlog is going to be. Here's how long it's going to take me to get out of it. But the more bodies you throw at it, the worse it's going to get. People are going to get frustrated. And then you're going to end up with this thing where you have a week 3 associate training a week 1 associate, and you start calling people veterans if they've been there longer than 90 days.
It's a recipe for disaster.
I hurt some feelings on that one, I could tell.
And I think, a bunch of people listening too have the same visceral reaction. You're just going to lose. You're born to lose. It's what you're saying. It's slower to move faster. Perfect.
And then kind of, after hiring and getting the bodies in and moving along, how would you, I guess the way I'll ask it is, how would you recognize like young Adrian, on the shop floor, ready for taking on more management capabilities and, going next level? Is there a tried and true way to kind of spot, somebody who's ready to take on additional responsibilities in that way?
Yes. So the standard, the bare minimum is after 30 days of the ramp up, everybody will cross train either one function upstream or downstream from their primary role. That way we know everybody at some point of the year is going to need time off, whether it's PTO, vacation, sick, self-sick, jury duty, whatever. And we know we have somebody who can step in and maintain business continuity. Everybody's getting at least one. That's almost mandatory. Now, you're going to see the people who say, okay, that was fun. Not only do I know my position, but I know that one. I also want to know that one. And I want to know this one. And as long as they can demonstrate that proficiency, why would I stop them? I'm going to put all the information that I have out there is going to be available because I needed to quickly reference how to run the entire organization. And people are going to pay attention way more to what I do than what I say. So when they see me reference all these things that are out there, I don't care if they make fun of me when I'm not around, because I used to make fun of my very first boss when he wasn't around. And you know what happened the days I made fun of him? My operation ran better than when I did it on my own. So he gave me the breadcrumbs of what it took to get my organization or my operation under control. And then I use that to turn around and replicate those behaviors in my people. So instead of me trying to manage my entire operation, I just had to make sure each person managed their portion of it.
So cool. Yeah, that's great. So we've got this big, well-trained, robust team, cross-trained all over. People are sick. Doesn't matter, because Adrian can fill in for me or I can fill in for you or whatever's going on. How do you, there's another level of like warehouse optimization, right? The staff part's taken care of. What kind of things can facilities do to optimize just the warehouse in general? Some tips and tricks maybe for people out there.
So number one, you need to know every part of your house, right? Understand your space. I'll say understand your warehouse space, right? And what does that mean? Let's go to another analogy. In the middle of the night, if you had to get up and go anywhere in your house, you could probably do it in pitch black because you know where everything is in your house. Now, if I come to your house and try to move around at midnight with no lights, I'm going to break something, either on me or something in the house. So we have to become that familiar with our space. And then once you can understand your space, you start to understand the product that's coming through it, right? So back to school, back to college, I use that analogy a lot. So back to school is small stuff like pens and paper, like very small. And then back to college is microwaves and mini fridges. And if I'm selling 100,000 of each one of each event, that's two different amounts of space. 100,000 packs of paper doesn't take up that much space, but 100,000 microwaves does. So once you start to see that, and that's one of those things that operations is going to see like right here, right? Sales, marketing, procurement, transportation, they don't see that at all. So this is where the communication comes and says, hey, I'm out of space, or I'm going to be out of space because this stuff is coming in too quickly. Is any of it going out? When is it going out? And if they are unable to give you answers, you're going to say, well, at this point in time, we are going to come to a gridlock, right? And so, again, this goes back to the communication between the floor and the office to say, how do we make sure we don't try to turn over a whole entire gallon into an 8-ounce cup? Most of it's going to end up outside of the cup.
When you walk around a warehouse, and we get to visit a lot of warehouses, I've often wondered, at what stage does the warehouse efficiency start to degrade, right? Like, do you really want to see like open pallet positions? Is it okay to see a couple pallets on the floor if there's a staging area? Like, at what does that start to get harder and harder in terms of, fullness for a warehouse?
The number for that is 85%. So anything above 85%, start to feel like 100. So most people can't tell the difference between 100 and 101 pounds. 85% full and 100% full feel the same. There was those little slide puzzles made out of squares that had like the one empty square.
Yeah, with the numbers, you have to organize them.
Right. So if you don't have that one empty square to move something around, you're stuck. All the pieces, there's nowhere for it to go. Ideally, you want to be around 80%. And so let's say, okay, I need my entire warehouse in quarter 4. Quarter 1, I only need 60% of it. Of this 60%, right? So let's say there's 60 aisles. I still want to have 80% of them full. So 48 of the 60, and I want to have 12 that I can play around with. So as more volume starts to come in than goes out, like an inbound peak, I can say, okay, now that prompts me to keep opening up. So where I have that 20% empty locations at all time. And as the sales outpace the receipts, then I can say, okay, now I need to collapse these aisles to make sure that I'm at no more than 20% empty locations. When you're above 20% empty locations, you start to Swiss cheese your warehouse. Now you're causing yourself unnecessary travel time.
Yeah.
And so that's the
right. Well, I just wanted to clarify, just 100%, like when we talk about 80, 85, 100%, that is only including real like rack positions, not in the aisle, not in the dock, that's actual store, permanent storage locations.
correct.
Yeah.
Okay. And is finally sinking in for me, your Q4, Q1 strategy. So, it's going to be really busy in Q4. We're filling the warehouse. You and I talked about this before of, we're at 110%. We're making up new rack locations. When you get to Q1, you are like cutting off whole sections of the warehouse at the far, far back of it and say, I will only open up the furthest away racking once we get over 85% occupancy. Do I get that right?
Mm-hmm. Correct. That's exactly it.
That's so good, because now like nobody's walking to the very, very furthest end of the warehouse, right? That's very clever.
So like I say, my analogy there is warehouses are alive, right? And so it breathes, it inhales and it exhales. And it's very tough. It's very tough after you've taken a big, deep breath in to take another deep breath in. And consequently, once you take a deep breath out, it's very difficult to take another deep breath out.
Yeah,
so you have to respect the balance, expanding and contracting.
One of the things that we see is that the labor costs are one of the most variable component of the cost of, manufacturing a product. And we can help people identify, your labor cost per unit is way different between line 1, line 2, line 3, shift 1, shift 2, shift 3. I guess where I'm heading with the question is, if you were to add a new line or a new shift, how would you, and I think more focused on a shift, because then now it's a different point in time even, what would you say would be your approach to making sure you get the most out of it, closest to full effectiveness as compared to shift 1?
So everything we've covered up to this point, you have to give them the same exact thing during their hours, right? So you cannot be a Monday through Friday, 9 to 5 person in support, and then there's nobody there at nights and weekends. Every single shift has to be standalone, as if they were the only shift of the organization, right? The next piece, again, this is why the cross-training is very critical, especially in the support functions. We call them critical roles. It's the function where there's only one person who does this per shift. But if you only have one person on the roster who knows how to do it, you are toast. So I personally say that you need to, well, let me ask this. How many cars, Alex, how many tires on your car?
4. Yeah.
Peter?
Yeah, you got the wrong guy. I got 2. I have a bicycle.
Yeah.
I can take the subway.
So mine is 4 also. So when you have critical roles, you need to have no less than 4 people that know that function, right? So you can have the one person who's on vacation, one person, life is going to happen to them.
Sure.
They're going to call in. One person's on jury duty, and that 4th person, they may not be the best, but at least they know what to do. And I've seen organizations with 100, 500, and 1,000 people with an average tenure of 5, 10, and 20 years. One person calls out and the operation goes, to the wolves until that person returns.
It's a nightmare. We see that all the time. The purchase manager cannot be sick. Purchasing cannot be sick, or they have to have their cell phone. They'll never go on vacation.
No, nobody knows how to read their spreadsheet.
No,
what does it mean?
And God save you if you touched it, Adrian. You touch that spin, the whole thing breaks, and now they got to build it back up. That's brutal.
Yeah, get it. They end up ordering triple of everything because it's like, I don't know whether they order it before they left. We don't order some. We can't run that risk. Order more.
We need more sugar. Yeah. I have a question about dashboards. Do you have a question about dashboards?
let's hear yours.
It's probably the same question. So we got the whole facilities up and running. It's humming. What are the key performance indicators that are typical, that are powerful? What's useful? Again, we have listeners that probably don't have anything and are interested in implementing something like that. What kind of stuff should they be tracking?
You definitely are going to look at your cost per carton. How much does it cost me to move each box? So there's 8 of them that I do want to cover, and I can always remember 7 of them off the top of my head.
We'll all work together to keep this. Is great. Cost per carton. How much does it cost for us just to have a warehouse and have people in the warehouse?
So when you say cost to move a carton, that's like the cost to get it into its storage position and then get it back out the door on the other end. Is that right? Yeah.
Correct.
And then in the context of manufacturing, I guess you would divide that into 2 sections, right? It would be the cost to bring in a barrel of something, and then the cost to shuttle it back and forth to the point where it's empty, kind of deal.
Yeah, you'll have an inbound cost per carton. You'll have an inbound cost per carton, an outbound cost per carton, and a total. Mm-hmm. So of course, both of those inbound and outbound will be higher because once you blend them, that's going to make the rate lower. But, you could tell whether your building is winning or losing by overall cost per carton. And then you could say, okay, so it's almost like this. Are we winning the game because my offense is scoring? Or are we winning the game because my defense keeps getting takeaways? Mm-hmm. Now, as long as we win, ultimately, that's all we really care about. But we do need to know why. Because as we face the next opponent, we may need to actually score on offense, not just defense.
Sure. Okay, cost per carton, number 1. What?
Very closely related is cartons per hour.
Cool.
And so, if your car is running 6,000 RPM, but you're going 10 miles an hour, you're in first gear. And if you're on the interstate, that is horrible, right? So you want to make sure that for every hour that you have in the building, that you are moving an appropriate amount of product. Otherwise, the first metric, cost per carton, is going to be, totally off kilter as well.
Now, I'm guessing the next one then is going to be something related to idle time, right? Because the cartons per hour is going to be slow if there's no demand.
You're trying to skip ahead.
I'm trying to skip ahead. I'm trying to see if I can read the book. But
So how we do this is quality, right? And so if I go through the drive-through line and I order a chicken sandwich and then you give me a cheeseburger, well, now you've wasted the time to make the cheeseburger, and now you have to spend the time again to make the chicken sandwich. So now you spent 2 times the effort and only got 1 output. Not only that, you've now delayed everybody else behind you. You've now put everything behind. Quality is one of the ways that we measure downtime, because if you do it right the first time, you don't have it.
Did you track quality, missed picks? What's the stat? So missed picks would be the...
So, and whatever the error rate is, it's usually some kind of formula called DPMO, or defects per million orders. And so this is going to make some people cringe, but if the DPMO is 99.6, saying that for every 1,000 orders or every million orders, I can mess up 4,000. 4,000 orders. Okay, let's go with 1,000 orders. You can mess up 4.
Sure.
If I get 4 people's order wrong out of 1,000, hey, bear with me a little bit, okay? And we would say, hey, we can stay in business. I think there's enough forgiveness in the human element that if I go to this company 1,000 times to get a product and they mess it up 4 times out of 1,000 transactions, okay. And that seems to be an acceptable rate that I've seen in a variety of experiences.
Okay, great. So cost per carton, cartons per hour, rate. What else is there?
I'm going to move this last one. I'm going to move this one all the way to the bottom intentionally. So next we're going to go with cube. Cube is how full the truck is or the box is or anything is. How much of it are we utilizing per trip, right? So if you think about an airplane, it's a fixed cost to move that entire plane. And you incur that cost whether the plane is empty or full. So usually the metric is around 70 to 80%. So if the container is 70 to 80% full of product and the 20 to 30% is air, then when we ship that, the cost to ship that, we are at least within the variation of not losing money in that transaction.
Yeah, and that's interesting that you mentioned that. It's something that we run across sometimes in purchasing and receiving, where they pay for third-party freight and they want to work out what's my unit cost for the raw material, the landed unit cost, including the freight cost. And, if I'm going to buy, produce, right? And I'm buying pomegranates, right? But I only need a couple boxes of them. Well, I got to pay for the truck anyways, and I'll eventually use potatoes. So fill the rest of the truck with potatoes, right? But like the truck, I hired the truck because of the pomegranates, and I could have bought the potatoes from somebody local and had free trucking. So now I need to make sure I land the full cost of the truck on the pomegranates, and the potatoes had free shipping, right? So anyways, just interesting side point on that cost calculation on receiving stuff for free.
Cube.
But it's related to the cube thing, kind of.
That's cool.
Okay.
Okay.
That's a very good understanding of it. Next is going to be level of service, or LOS.
Mm-hmm.
And basically this is on time, right? On time. Was it on time departure, on time delivery, on time, whatever it is, right? And usually that's measured 99% plus. So for every 100 orders I do, one of them can be leave a little late. And I've worked in environments where the goal has been 99 too, right? And I just say that, not to say that it's unrealistic, but if you ran a 99.1, my goal of 99.2, you might as well ran a 0, right? So that's how important on time is, because some of these delivery companies, they have it contractually that if the package is not delivered on time, then all shipping charges are refunded to the So the quickest way to get fired at some of these delivery companies was to miss a trailer. So you mean to tell me that everybody all across the entire United States in our network got the package all the way to right around the corner, and the reason all the people right around the corner are not going to get their packages because you forgot to open the truck, and now you have to refund everybody in the city of Atlanta's shipping charges for that day?
Brutal.
I'm pretty sure your salary can go into the total amount of shipping charges lost a couple of times.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Level of service, clearly critical. What's next? I'm in school. This is great. I'm having a blast. I love it.
Let's see, engagement. This is, how does your team feel about working there, right? It's great. Yeah, we know the results pay the bills, but man, at some point, if people don't like coming there, you're going to struggle. This is where you need to find the right 640 people, or how to find 640 people. So if you are understaffed, you're going to burn people out. They're going to quit. That's going to really put strain on that. People are going to say, man, yeah, they pay well, but there's no quality of life. And people will leave and take lower paying jobs if there is some quality of life.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if they feel like their voice is heard, if they feel like they contribute, are they a preferred employer? What is their perception in the community? These things matter. My manager listens to me. I feel like I can go to them.
And
You really have problems when things are, I used to not like when people bring me, probably, Adrian, I have a complaint. I'm like, man, can't you just get back to work? But I realized they were bringing problems to me because they perceived I had the power to resolve them. And so as I started resolving them, it got quieter. And we got more productive and more efficient and more effective, right? But when people don't bring any concerns to you at all, it's because they don't believe you can fix anything.
Is that
And
your
that is
litmus
very
test?
loud.
Because it's not just the warehouse man. This advice is great for any organization, any part of a factory, anywhere else. What's your litmus test for how happy people are? Like, there's a production manager listening right now. What's your suggestion to them or management or whatever to gauge how happy people are, or how engaged they are?
How little you talk about work when you're at work.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, like, okay, we're going to talk about the standard stuff, the numbers, the quality, the metrics, the KPI. But I mean, how's the wife? How's the husband? How's the kids? How's the dog? How's the garden? Did you see that race? Did you see the game? Did you, how was crochet in class? How was Bible study?
Sure. And the more kind of connected they are there, just the better team it is, right? It's just more, It's more fun at work. Yeah. Love it. Okay. Engagement. You got 2 more. I've been taking full notes. I'm having a great time.
compliance, right? Or best practice. And this was a very small percentage of our KPI. It was one of the lowest weighted factors. And here's why. Because if I tell you I'm going to do an audit the third week of March, you're not going to care about doing anything right except the third week of March. So when you do everything right the third week of March, hey, you got 100% on compliance audit. Why are the rest of your numbers still in the tank, right? And this is where if you focus on the behaviors that are captured in the SOP, if you focus on those things, the numbers will come. I don't care about the numbers. If you do what's right, the numbers will come.
Yeah, love it. And by measuring it just a little bit all the time, people are a little less guarded. Now you're getting real data as opposed to, hey, this is the cleanest. We're being super clean this 1 week and everything out. It doesn't matter because we're not measuring. But if it's just a little bit everywhere, that's quite clever. That's great. Okay, last one. Last but not least.
And I moved this to the back intentionally for all the people that always say this is first.
Yeah.
And I haven't said it yet.
Okay.
And I'm making all the EHS people he hasn't said it yet. Safety. Safety. I put it at the back of the line. So at the beginning and end of the day, we want people to leave the same way they came in, right? I know the spill safety guys, right? And the reason I say, they say, what's half the battle? Showing up. Right? It's not safety. And the other half isn't safety. But at the end of the day, we want to be able to come in with no fear that we're going to harm somebody else, be harmed by somebody else, and that our work environment there are no hazards to our lives.
That's great. I'm concerned we're running out of time. Alex, what kind of questions do you have?
There's one that I really like to ask, anyone who comes in and gives advice to organizations and consults for management, which is, what's the advice that you give that management doesn't want to accept and implement and wants to say, I don't know, I don't know if we can do that. Or maybe they just listen to you. That could be.
You're so convincing.
No, this is it's, hate to be so cliche, but this is the way we've always done it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I said, well, you want a Kodak, Circuit City, Radio Shack. And I start listing Blockbuster. And there's a very common theme with all those names that I just mentioned, is that they're no longer in business and they used to be dominating players in their sector. So in order to stay relevant, you do have to evolve. And it's also okay to think, try, and fail. So let's talk about a couple of failures. Purple and green Heinz ketchup. They thought it would be cool. People like, I don't want purple ketchup on my hot dog. That's disgusting. Something that I think was amazing was crystal clear Pepsi.
So
very
clear.
Novel idea.
Yeah. I like it too.
And then the Pontiac Aztec. That thing was just disgusting looking. I don't even know, of all the nice things concept cars they've come up with, what made them decide, this one, not only are we going to make it, we're going to make millions of them.
Okay.
Why? So these are billion-dollar companies, each one of them, that made tremendous faux pas as far as, making a product. And yet they're still successful in making billions of dollars. So just because you're small doesn't mean that if you make one mistake, you're going to go out of business. It's just, hey, look, quickly assess. Say, hey, look, if I'm not here by this time, then I need to punt and go back to my core business. But we do need to find ways to, adjust and adapt to whatever the market is doing.
Saying, try something new. And if it fails, it fails, but you got to keep trying. And let's put some tight deadlines around when we know it's a success or not. That's great. That's all I have for today.
Yeah, for sure. Adrian, you've been really generous with your time. We're very grateful, and we've learned a lot. So thank you so much.
Adrian, people like the cut of your jib, I'm sure. Where can they find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Adrian Betts, as the name is spelled, Betts. That's the last name. You'll see Expandur LLC. And if you type in Xpandur, there's nobody else out there.
Of course. Nice.
You'll see the rooster, that you'll know that's him. You'll see the glasses, that's him. You'll see the mohawk,
the handsome face,
back.
the whole 9 yards here. Adrian, amazing. Thank you so much again. It was a pleasure.